Good evening, everyone. Welcome. This is the September 26, 2023 meeting of the Carrboro Town Council. I have some interesting items on our agenda tonight, so I'm looking forward to hearing from staff about those. But first, I'm going to ask council members for your assent to adding an item to the end of the agenda, a closed session item to discuss a personnel matter under subsection A6 of the closed session statute. Is there any objection to that?
Second.
Moved by Randy, seconded by Susan, that we add that item to the end of the agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Matter passes unanimously. Okay, we're going to begin. We have a guest poet reading tonight. Many, I think we all know very well. Paul Jones, welcome. Yes, please come on up to the podium. You don't have to touch the computer. Okay.
I like to touch them.
Thanks for being here, Paul.
I'm glad to be here. And Liza Wolfe Francis could not be here, so I came here with a poem by Constantine Cavafy, a poet who wrote largely in Greek in the early 20th century, Waiting for the Barbarians. What are we waiting for, assembled here in the council chambers? The barbarians are due today. Why isn't anything going on here in the council chambers? Why are the members sitting there without passing laws? Because the barbarians are coming today. What's the point of making laws now? Once the barbarians are here, they'll make all the laws. Why did our mayor get up so early? Why is he sitting here with his best jacket on? Because the barbarians are coming today. And the mayor is waiting to receive their leader. He even has a scroll to give them, loaded with titles and imposing names. Why have our managers and department heads come out today? They're wearing their best suits and most elegant dresses. Why have they put on bracelets of many amethyst and rings sparkling with magnificent emeralds? Why are they wearing expensive shoes? Because the barbarians are coming today, and things like that dazzle the barbarians. Why don't our distinguished poets show up as usual and instead send me? Because the barbarians are coming today and they're bored with poetry and public speaking. Wait, why is there suddenly confusion? Why are people's faces getting so serious? Why are the streets emptying so rapidly? Because night has fallen and the barbarians haven't come. Some of our men came back from the border and say, there are no barbarians. Now what's going to happen without barbarians? Those people were kind of a solution.
Thank you, Paul Jones, longtime member of the Poets Council here in Carrboro.
Touché.
Looking forward to this year's West End Poetry Festival, which is going to be here sooner than you realize. Thank you, Paul. All right, I do have a scroll from which I will read. Mr. Manager, if you have someone here from the planning department to receive this proclamation.
Your nice jacket.
My nicest jacket.
She got a hat too. She ready to receive the scroll.
And scroll has such a different meaning now in the digital age, right?
Marty's here too.
Marty, feel free to join us.
In the house. Planner's in the house.
All
Leslie's
plan-
right here too.
And Wesley is here.
We've got good planning for credentials.
That's right. I have a proclamation. This is for Community Planning Month, one that we've been proclaiming for several years running now. Whereas change is constant and affects all places, and community planning can help communities manage change in a way that provides more and better options for how people live, work, and get around. And whereas in 2022, the town completed its first comprehensive plan, Carrboro Connects, a 20-year plan that for the first time brings the goals of the town as a whole into a single document, from expanding housing and transportation options to supporting local businesses to improving access to open space. And we'll be hearing more about that this evening. And whereas in the past year, the town's planning staff has worked to implement Carrboro Connects, focusing on identified priorities while continuing to carry out the regular services provided to the community. And these implementation efforts have included drafting revisions to the town's land use ordinance to align the town's regulations with identified goals, beginning the process for creating a new downtown area plan, identifying areas for improvement in the development review process, completing a racial equity analysis of the traffic calming process, launching the Green Neighborhoods Grant Program, expanding transportation demand management grant programming, coordinating with NCDOT on roadway and infrastructure improvements to enhance safety and accessibility for pedestrians and people on bicycles, including the completion of resurfacing and restriping projects to add bike lanes on East Main Street and Merritt Mill Road, and planning for similar improvements on North Greensboro Street and Jones Ferry Road in the coming year. And whereas the planning staff also hosted and participated in countless community events and conferences to forward the town's goals through community engagement and coordination with partners and stakeholders, and continued to implement the Community Climate Action Plan and Bicycle Plan, among many other projects and events. And whereas the full benefit of planning requires public officials and community members who understand, support, and demand excellence in planning and plan implementation. And whereas the American Planning Association has designated the month of October 2023 as National Community Planning Month, now therefore I, Damon Siles, Mayor of the town of Carrboro, North Carolina, do hereby proclaim October 2023 to be Community Planning Month in Carrboro. I encourage all residents to celebrate the contributions made by the professional planners of Carrboro and neighboring communities, and to recognize the dedication of the members of our numerous volunteer advisory boards and other community members contribute their time and talents to the improvement of Carrboro. Furthermore, I encourage residents to become advocates for and participants in the implementation of our award-winning Carrboro Connects Comprehensive Plan. This, the 26th day of September, 2023. Trish, applause for you. Thanks for being. I know we're going to be hearing from you on a couple of these items today, but if you want to share any remarks on behalf of your department, that'd be great.
I just thank you all the town, the mayor and the council and the community for being very forward-looking and very community-oriented and concerned about our environment and how we can work and live together with the conditions we have to face and manage. And so, I appreciate that as a planner and a member of this community as well, and appreciate the support we get from the manager's office in particular for our ability to recruit staff and have good people working here with us. So.
Thanks, Trish.
You bet. Thank you.
See you soon. We will next move on to announcement of upcoming meetings. Mr. Clerk.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Just got a couple announcements here. First up, tomorrow, September 27th, we have a Racial Equity Commission meeting at 6 p.m., and that'll be at the 108 Bim Street. Next week, October 2nd, we have the Tourism Development Authority meeting at 3 p.m. That will be held virtually via Zoom. Link details are on our website at carrboro.nc.gov if you'd like to participate in that. And then the next council meeting will be next Tuesday, October 3rd at 7 p.m. here at Town Hall.
Leslie, we of course have to acknowledge that this Sunday, October 1st, is the Carrboro Music Festival, back for a second year since coming out of the public emergency for COVID-19. 100 performers or acts have been confirmed to perform all over downtown Carrboro for free. So please come downtown this Sunday, spend the day here. and enjoy all the live music. There will probably also be some events on the Saturday afternoon before. Usually there's one or two things. So check out the town's website at carboronc.gov to find out all the information and lineups for Carrboro Music Festival. Other community meetings, events, Randy. Carrboro.
I believe Thursday, and I don't know if you said this, I apologize, Wes, if you did, Transit Partners meeting Thursday. Chapel Hill Transit Partners, and Damon and I will be attending. And I just want to come behind Damon and say, come on out to the music festival. It is the best. It is the best in the region in the southeast. It is extraordinary.
Thank you, Randy. I don't have that Transit Partners meeting on my calendar, so let's make sure to confirm when we get out of here tonight. Thank you for mentioning that. Barbara, you're next.
Thank you, Mayor. And the day before the music festival, Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, the Eta Phi Zeta graduate chapter, would like to invite all who are interested to our Fish Fry fundraiser. All proceeds support our Be the Change Scholarship Fund, and it will be held at Holman Family Dental Care at Chapel Hill North Shopping Center, and it is a fundraiser for our scholarship fund. Thanks.
Thank you, Barbara. Sammy, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to plug the Solarized Triangle is at its lowest tier, and we have till September 30th for folks to sign on. Doesn't mean you'll sign a contract or anything. There's more time thereafter to do those details, but folks have till the end of this month, September 30th, to sign on at the lowest tier. It's a very affordable way of getting solar.
Thanks, Sammy. And that's basically signing on for the free evaluation to see how it would work for your home. Is that right?
Exactly. The first step towards potentially, and actually, Randy, you participated in the program. Right?
I have solar, and my bill last month was $11.
Nice.
And so the next step is to get one of those battery storage packs. But oh my God, it's amazing.
Great.
And they're great to work with. They were perfect.
Well, thanks to you both. Thanks, Sammy, for the reminder about that program. And again, I think there is information on the town website, or at least, Google Solarized Triangle or whatever.
Triangle 2023, because there are other years Solarized pop up, so 2023 is key for finding the right one.
Thank you. Okay. I don't have anyone signed up to speak during the public comment period. Anyone here? All right. Then we'll move on to the consent agenda, Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, council members. One item on the consent agenda is the approval of the minutes from January 10th, 17th, 30th, and February 7th, 2023. We have changes by Councilmember Susan Romaine.
I'd like to hold off on February 7th. I didn't have a chance to review it, but other than that, I'll move January 10th, January 17th, and January 30th.
Sammy. It's been moved by Sammy, seconded by Barbara to approve all of the items on the consent agenda except for the February 7th minutes, which we'll postpone to the next meeting or to the next available meeting. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Matter passes unanimously. Okay. Mr. Manager, back to you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. The first item on the other matters is review of the Lord Broad Neighborhood Overlay District provisions. The purpose of this agenda item is to request that the town council review information about how the overlay district provisions have been working. A Marty Roop, our development review administrator, will provide a presentation.
Welcome, Marty.
Thank you. Good evening. Okay, I have a fairly brief report, just an update as the manager noted. The last update being in June 2020, and I'll just jump right in. This is just a photo of the neighborhood, an aerial photo, kind of bird's eye view of the neighborhood. And then this is the map showing with a bold black outline all the properties that are within the district. I'm noticing now it's labeled draft, but it is now official. This is the map we used when we had it in front of you as a draft, but that is what was adopted. Just to briefly remind everyone the purpose and in general what the provisions do. It was adopted in June of 2018. Again, in June of 2020, we had reported to you on it, and we're doing a follow-up report now. changed the front yard setbacks from 25 feet to 15 feet to match the more the historical development pattern of the neighborhood, which was closer to 15 feet. Limits the height of new construction to 23 feet, again, to match the historical pattern of development, smaller homes that don't necessarily go up to 35 feet, which is what was allowed previously. Newly constructed homes are also size limited to 1,750 square feet, repeating myself, in accordance with the historical pattern of the neighborhood. And it does allow for some modest additions to existing homes that go up to around 2,200 square feet, just to allow for expanding families and things of that nature that might need to increase their home size a little bit. The parking standards do require 2 spaces and discourage parking between the front facade and the right-of-way. And occupancy by more than 4 unrelated individuals in a dwelling unit is not permissible. And there was a grandfathered 3-year period of time that any homes that did have more than 4 could keep that, but then they had to go back to 4. With that, I have an update of what has happened since June of 2020. A few permits here and there that I'll just briefly summarize, as noted in the staff report or abstract provided to you. Technically, the Habitat project was outside of the boundaries of the map I just showed you, but it's adjacent and obviously is a part of the neighborhood. So I did note that the Habitat project has now been built, is occupied, so that's great news. And moving on from there, there was a home addition at 406 Broad Street. The Board of Adjustment granted a variance for 104 Hill Street for construction of a new home. The property owners, same property owners still own the property, but they have chosen to not construct the home yet. But the variance runs with the land, so at some point, presumably a home will be constructed at 104 Hill Street. 106 Hill Street, next door, was a town-owned property, and we have worked with the Pee Wee Homes organization to now convey that property to Pee Wee Homes with a deed restriction limiting the use of the property to 3 single-family affordable homes, meeting our affordable housing price points. We are still doing the review for that project. We're close to approval, so I don't have an exact date to share with you, but hopefully relatively soon they will be under construction. Board of Adjustment also issued a variance for 408 Broad Street to allow for the addition of an addition to an existing home. All the permits that were issued, to perhaps state the obvious, are in accordance with the provisions of the district. A couple of miscellaneous issues. The police chief reports several hundred calls received, but they all appear to be consistent with calls for service in other parts of town. Nothing particularly unusual caught his eye in looking through the data. And perhaps as evidenced by there not being a crowd of people from the neighborhood, we are just suggesting that this report might take a different format in the future. We can still do it this way if you'd like, but we were just putting that out there. I have been in contact with Hudson Vaughn as a representative of the neighborhood, and tried to call him this afternoon but didn't reach him. It's my understanding he did put this information out through their listserv, so I would like to be so bold as to state that not having a room full of people suggests that the provisions are working in accordance with what they wanted. But as the evidence, the data shows, there hasn't been that much activity since 2018. A permit here and there, not much in the way of new construction except for that Habitat project.
Great, thanks, Marty. Just
You're
to
welcome.
follow up on your point about the neighbors and speaking with Hudson Vaughn, received an email this morning, I think from both me and Barbara received this email from Hudson, just saying he wouldn't be able to be here tonight, but
Okay.
he wanted just to share his own anecdotal impressions with us, were that the overlay has been serving its purpose overall, have not seen major investor expansions like they were seeing before the changes, and most homes that have transitioned have gone to non-investor owners. So
Okay.
that was kind of their overall goal. For council members who may not remember the sort of rationale behind this change back in 2018. I also just mentioned that Marty brought up the question about how this information should be shared with the council in the future. The reason that Marty's here tonight is that one of the things that the council did in 2018 when we adopted this overlay district is we asked for regular reporting on how things were going in the neighborhood, specifically with relation to the new district. I think every year and a half or something
Yes.
like that. But we didn't specify that it had to be, a report before the council during a business meeting. It could have been, but I think, speaking to Marty's question about whether this is something that we want to receive in written form in the future, or just, or whatever, that's the question before us, I guess. Barbara. And then
Thank
Randy.
you, Mayor. I really appreciated this report. I think it was very laid out, covered all the bases for me. And the next to last slide, the one before this, consider requesting this report in a different format in the future. And so, I mean, if there's not any activity going on, I mean, I'm not averse to, just having some type of written report versus staff coming before us in this way tonight. So report looks good. I appreciate it. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Barbara. I had Randy next, and then I'll go to.
I had two
Danny.
questions. I'm giggling to myself. You'll have to excuse me. On the report from Chief ATAC, is there any sense of, yes, the calls may be the same as and consistent throughout the rest of town, but I'm curious, several hundred, that's a very small space, of 5-6 streets.
Yes.
So I'm curious to, over time to see not only what they are, because if they're consistent, but how it may change. Okay. And given that, I'm going to differ and say I really like this reporting 18 months because, and I would not like to see it sunset because of change over time, and because the Broad Lloyd overlay attempted to do is to model the way for and to have the neighborhood protected from serious demographic change, especially when it comes to rentals. But one of the things that I'm hoping that we're going to be doing, and I'm looking forward to it because it's also in the comprehensive plan, is looking to create a robust lease-to-own program, which is either public or private, or public and private subsidized, because rentals are, a red line against the progress towards intergenerational wealth, and a neighborhood such as Lloyd Broad is just too vulnerable. And for that reason, I would like to continue to have reports just to keep a hand on the pulse.
So before I go to Danny next, Randy, can I just to ask some clarification? Or would you be okay with? I think I agree. I would like to keep getting the reports, but just in a written format rather than in a presentation.
I would like a presentation, because if things start to shift, people could come, and we don't know. I think it's still nascent. Because we're just, 2018, then we hit the pandemic, 2020. I would give it a little more running time first. And it doesn't seem to be of any major, hassle.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
So I have Danny next, and then Randy. And then Susan.
Thanks, Damon, and thank you, Marty. Thank you to the planning department. I'm really heartened to see that this is broadly being effective in its intent, and that folks who are working really close to the neighborhood see it as such. And so, with that in mind, my questions are really about some coming things in the pipeline. This is all pretty good with me as is. So far as we have examined changes to our LUO, I've been hesitant to support the broad use of overlay districts just because they're a lot of labor and a little bit of a headache. But considering how effective this has been at, sort of preserving opportunities for wealth building and some, demographic security in an important neighborhood, I wonder, to what extent is it feasible to use this as we look at this, and we'll be talking about the comprehensive plan and increasing our density possibly in transit corridors. If there are other places in town where similar overlay districts might help achieve this goal and where that's feasible. I'm mindful, as many communities are throughout the triangle, of not, we don't want to encourage displacement, and we don't want to, certainly not suppress investment, but I think our intent in pursuing housing policies is not to take the top off the town for real estate investment necessarily. And so, I would be interested in, as we move into that discussion, some benchmarking with this neighborhood. If it's possible to have like effects on price per square footage in the real estate market, rental impacts, I would be really interested to know that in the neighborhood, what those trends have been, and get sort of a more granular understanding there, and then what other areas in town might be good candidates for a similar overlay district that would not, cause our PZI department to lose the rest of their minds entirely. I think there's a chance that being targeted with a couple more of these in combination with some of the changes that we're looking at making might kind of strike a real balance between our differing objectives.
Thanks, Danny. Susan, you're next.
Marty, thank you for your report.
You're welcome.
And I agree, Danny. It's nice to hear this news that everything seems to be working well with the intentions of the overlay district. I wanted to just say one question. I agree with Barbara in terms of, I think, this idea of just folding this report into one of our already existing reports. And I'm just throwing this out if it, I'm thinking the police department report is every 3 weeks? 3 months, I mean, is it every quarter? But that way, I'm thinking, Randy, we would actually get that information rather than needing to wait 18 months. If an issue does come up, we would be knowing every quarter. There would be some notification within that report saying this has come up in this overlay district. So I like that, actually more regular reporting. And I think, too, it's just a reminder that part of this process, I think, is continuing to be really engaged with that community, whether it's through the police department patrolling or Hudson Vaughn or the Jackson Center. Barbara, when we did the Good Neighbor initiative, I thought, that was a terrific way of talking to neighbors and getting a lot of feedback. So I think that will be a really important part of this process, too, is continuing to look for those ways to, if people do want to be providing concerns about the overlay district, that they have an easy way to do so. My one question is, and Danny, I appreciate your comments, is Rogers Road also an overlay district? It's not. Is this our only overlay district then?
It's not our only overlay district, but yeah, Rogers Road is a new district unto itself.
I mention it because with the other districts, I don't know if the overlay districts, I don't know if they have reporting requirements or not, but it seems like we would want to have some kind of consistency maybe with all of the overlay districts. Maybe we just, in that same report, if any issues come up in any of the overlay districts, those can be brought before council.
Only overlay of this kind, and it was really designed with specific purposes in
for
mind.
this. Okay.
The reason, without rehashing all the discussion that happened back in 2018, a lot of the reason behind that was there was a lot of back and forth and discussion on the council and with community members about being careful with zoning overlays like this one, because I think, as Danny was hinting at, in some of the ways in which this overlay district operates may have been appropriate for achieving some specific goals in this particular neighborhood, but seeing this as a tool to be used in other neighborhoods could be. I would urge some caution on that. It starts to operate in some, I think, in other ways, almost like a preservation district rather than. I think what we were trying to do here was achieve some very specific goals, and so the reason for having this 18-month reporting period was to kind of keep an eye on that. I don't know that you're going to see trends any quicker than that, honestly. I would hate for us to come out of this meeting having placed an additional reporting burden on staff. I wonder if we might think about a kind of a compromise approach here between, say, what Barbara suggested and what Randy's written report for council, unless staff sees trends that are going in a direction that they feel they need to alert council about. In terms of the goal, in terms of the overlay district, for example, no longer achieving the goals it was set out to achieve, that kind of thing, or to prevent the kinds of displacement or transition in property ownership that we're afraid might be happening that was happening in that neighborhood. Again, I'm just trying to get to this place of like, reducing reporting burden on staff and getting the information in a way, especially because, for example, in this report, it's pretty straightforward. There's not a lot of note here. And now there may be in the future, but also, you know, again, it's not like this is, I think, not placed a big burden on Marty, but I just don't want to go away with placing more burden on Marty. I did have Barbara, but Sammy hasn't spoken yet, so Sammy can go and then we'll go to Barbara.
I mean, just to share my sense on how often, I think 18 months is fine. I was going to even suggest 2 years, but after hearing my colleagues, it's like 18 months is still something folks want, and maybe just in the consent agenda as something that as a report there and not like part of the meeting. I think it's important to have it as part of the consent agenda so that it is available to the public and it's more easily accessible for folks to access.
That would be another approach to take that would meet that middle ground. Barbara, go ahead.
Yeah, and I just want to follow up, Mayor. I think you said it. Of course, you know, we still want to see the reporting, as Sammy suggested, maybe on the consent agenda, you know, for the public. But certainly if there are changes in trends, you know, or anything significant happens that needs to be presented to us, then staff maybe comes back.
Sure.
Is what I was thinking, because I don't want to get rid of the reporting.
Right.
So I just wanted to be clear on that. Thanks.
Let me suggest this. Maybe we receive this report and authorize staff to provide future updates through the consent agenda.
Well, I
Go ahead,
wanted to
Randy.
make one more comment. I see this as different from other things. When I read through the pocket questions, you know, this is a very good example of why pocket questions, they may shift over time. And if it's buried in something written, it loses what we intended it to be, which is to really give us a sense of how the community is responding to policy. And for that reason, I still would encourage us in the short run, you know, to have a presentation where either whether or not people come out or not, we're talking about. We're keeping the essence of what we're looking to do here, you know, alive. Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, I've been sitting here long enough to know that when you're shuffling papers, consent, yeah, we all agree, but then we don't talk about it. This is very important to talk about because it's a way of looking at community and trying to keep the you know, the families in the neighborhood in a family manner, in a family way, to keep that essence there. So it's my particular view. I know many people who live in that neighborhood, and I just think that we made it different. It is different, and I'd rather see it have the life force behind it for a little longer, but I'm okay.
You sound like you have a very specific feeling about it. Would you like to make a motion?
Yeah, I'd like to move that we do not sunset, that we keep things as it is, at least in the short term.
Okay, well, it was never going to sunset. So
Next 18
can we
months.
suggest that we receive the report and continue to receive future reports every 18 months as we did tonight?
Right.
Okay.
And 18 months from now, if we want to review it, that's fine.
That's your motion?
Yep.
Is there a second? Second. Seconded by Danny. Mr. Manager, is that motion clear enough for you? All right. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marty. Right. Mr. Manager.
The next item is Carrboro Connect's Comprehensive Plan Implementation and Council Priority Status Report. The purpose of this item is to provide the Town Council with an update on the status of the implementation of the Carrboro Connect's Comprehensive Plan 2022 through 2024 and the council priorities. And Trish McGuire, Plan Director, has a presentation.
You're welcome.
Hello again, everybody. Hope this is an okay sound back there. Okay. So very happy to be here tonight again. And for this particular topic, I am here just representing really this project, and because since it is the comprehensive plan, it incorporates all of the town staff and our community in its development and implementation ultimately. So a couple of other folks are here from other departments as well, and I'm just really a spokesperson in part tonight, but I can report more specifically on planning things, and of course we'll provide you an update on how we went about doing this update for tonight, or preparing the information we've included in the agenda item, that is to say, for you tonight. So this report is on the comprehensive plan implementation, as well as on strategic priorities that were adopted as part of your budget retreat earlier this year. And as is fairly evident, these projects and strategies involve really all the departments of the town to bring them to life, and many of them will have extensive involvement from the community members outside of our town staff as well. The report tries to reflect the fact that we coordinate on these projects. We need to coordinate on these projects, and we work together to create this information for you through meetings cross-departmentally, so we can check on progress and clarification of understanding about the projects themselves as well. I do want to note that there are two new department heads, of course. We have J.G. Ferguson from Recreation, Parks, and Cultural Resources, and Kevin Belanger from Public Works, both of whom are working to bring their skills and expertise and strategies to work with their teams in those two departments, as well as all of us in working to bring those projects that they're involved with directly to life. So let's see what we've got. I will start first in this presentation on the comprehensive plan itself, and then go into the council priorities. Just a little overview of what that looks like. I'll try to cover these items, some background and progress for each of the two parts of the presentation, and then a little bit at the end about what to expect in the upcoming rest of this calendar year and into the next year. There are 3 attachments to the agenda item, just for everybody in the audience. For anyone who wants to refer back to this agenda item, first is one at a glance table that shows our progress on those on the 35 projects that were identified as priorities in the comprehensive plan. Also a summary of progress with regard to the 13 priorities the council identified, and then racial equity pocket questions as well. So those are attachments to the digital and physical agenda. So some background on the plan itself. It was adopted June 7th, 2022, so we're approaching a birthday, 16 months or so. Walking, that means we're walking, not able to talk yet. No, just kidding. Anyway, we hope and expect that familiarity is growing in the community, and it certainly is amongst our staff as well, on the elements of this document. It's a large document, there's a lot to it, and there is a lot to learn, and that does take time. Our last update was in December of last year for you, and the plan anticipates, and we have anticipated providing updates annually. We did look at scheduling a report to you in June, but there were a lot of other things going on at that time, so we shifted that report out to now. And so we have shifted the update to September, so rather than from June, for example. Recall for everyone the plan's foundations in advancing racial equity and climate action. These provisions, of course, these are clear themes that have emerged out of the plan, commitments the town had beforehand that have been strengthened and really galvanized, I think, in the time in recent years. And these things are permeating throughout our organization. I think since this year, you can see how the agenda items are now reflecting this information. We're working to consider. We're including the pocket questions with our agenda items. The budget document itself had new sections this year on both of these topics. You're seeing these things become more structured in the work of the things that the town is doing. In addition to sort of a little bit more background, just a quick refresher, the plan does have includes a number of chapters that focus on specific topical areas. Chapter 11 was included as an implementation framework, essentially, for the plan. And it did identify 35 priority projects, 5 in each of the 7 kind of fundamental elements or topical areas of the plan. Your retreat in January did help inform implementation priorities. A little refinement there. In the document, all 314 projects and strategies that were included in the plan are listed. And then, of course, there are those top 35 pulled out. And we are working to include these as part of our documentation or intention with regard to the budget. Also, was seeking to address how the comprehensive plan was being considered in the staff work of the staff. You'll remember that the plan, Chapter 11, does have this update text box in it, and it is really the kind of reminder to folks about how we have to work, intentionally and routinely to evaluate what our capacity is, what our priorities are, and that process will happen really as part of the annual budgeting process going forward. So there's a lot on this slide. It's not intended to communicate the details to you. That's included in the packet for people to look at more closely. This is showing the trend of actions related to those top 35 projects, with the color scheme being things that are shown in red are things that have not yet started. Things that are shown in purple are in planning stages. We're moving into analysis in the yellow. Blue is implementation, and green is the color we've assigned to things that are being completed. So we like this at-a-glance way to kind of keep track of these major priorities. There are obviously lots more details associated with these projects, and I've got some screenshots to zoom in on each of the elements of the plan to look at that more closely in a minute. We did include on this the version this year, the September 2023 version, hatch marks to show where there were adjustments or changes to these schedules from the previous report we did last December. And did include in the packet the 2 versions, the December version and the September version, and I have that in the slides as well if we want to dig in on that and have some discussion around that. So just going through the plan chapters, as we mentioned in the agenda item, just showing a more detailed look of just that time frame for those top 5 projects for each chapter. These are the ones for affordable housing. I'm just going to go in order of the plan chapters. And what we've included on this slide are those other comprehensive plan items that were not included in the top 35, but are also things that the departments are doing related to the comp plan's implementation. And so you can just see those listed here. And Anne Marie's here tonight. She can provide more information about these if you need information, of course, about the top part of this image as well. But just working on a variety of things that were also identified in the plan as strategies and projects that we wanted to advance in relation to our commitment to affordable housing. Similarly with climate and environment, so we've got the 5 projects here at the top, and then a list of a continued project that we're doing that was not in the top 5, but we're working on that as well. Transportation and mobility, some of the things that we're working on. We did expand our TDM program this year. We're working to expand it, and are working on really complete streets, more clarification of our policy and commitment there, and then safe routes to schools, some significant advancement we're working on in this area that is in addition to those commitments that are in the top 35 project list.
Just with STAR.
The STAR means that it's kind of an iterative process, so it's the type of project that's going to have kind of several components. We'll like residential, then maybe commercial, et cetera. Yep. Stormwater and infrastructure, green infrastructure, a number of projects that are outside of the list of the top 35, and then the projects that are in that top 35 list. Economic sustainability. And for economic sustainability in rec and parks, we don't have any extra projects. These are all here as resources. Again, we can go back to each of them as it's helpful to you if you have questions. And then the land use chapter, similarly, things that we're working on, some iterative ones, and then some other projects that we're working through. Chapter 10 is the chapter in the plan that was included to kind of help folks understand that there's a whole bunch of other stuff the town does besides the projects and strategies that are listed in the comp plan. That is to say, we provide basic services, and many of those things, like the way how our finance department runs, or how human resources does operate, or even service delivery, like collecting solid waste, et cetera, are not necessarily spelled out in a project or strategy in the comp plan. So we included that chapter as that context, and wanted to be able to see that relationship between ultimately changes that we make related to the comp plan in that, in relation to the basic services. So last year we did provide just a slide that sort of showed progress on each of the items that was included in Chapter 10 originally, and you'll be familiar with the language in the plan in Chapter 10, how similar it was, because it was taken from essentially the budget document. So it was those fiscal year priorities that we routinely included in the budget. As you've moved into the strategic priorities this year, we're really focusing in this report on those 13 priorities. And the budget document does have some other priorities and projects that are not all in that 13 list, but they are part of our service provision. So I hope that's clear. I can elaborate on more on that if that seems confusing to you, but we didn't provide that slide this year of the strategy of progress on each of those kind of ongoing aspects of the work of the departments that are not listed as a specific comp plan project or priority, strategic priority. As far as how we are building, we've been transitioning from the old Carrboro Connects website that we used, the Bang the Table website that we used for the comp plan. We've established a couple of several pages on the town's website where we've migrated the information that came from that site, as well as a place where we're including the implementation information that we're going forward with. So information on planning open houses that we're having. We've been having this in September, and we'll be having in October, are listed here, as well as again, the strategic priorities, the council's retreat, the work on the text amendments that are upcoming to a public hearing in October. So this is the page where we're providing that, reporting to the community. Just as it's not just the only method of doing that, but it's the place where we're sort of archiving and creating a library of those materials and serving as a resource. Let's see. So again, the strategic priorities, as you guys will remember, was an activity you went through at the retreat in January. And it was this huge list of things that came from a number of places. Chapter 10 in the comp plan, which was all of those fiscal year priorities. Chapter 11, the projects and goals and strategies. And then some other things that came from our readopted plans, the bike plan, community climate action plan, the ARPA projects that we had listed, and things that had already been committed to in the town projects report. So that's a story map that we have, report that we keep on the web, where we identify small projects, sidewalk implementation, a number of things. So those were all listed in that, and from that, the 13 priorities were identified. And so I'm going to just shift to that, what that list looks like. These are the ones that came from your retreat and then were formalized in your when you revisited it in March of this year. And we have included as an attachment, and I have slides to show the progress that we are making on these priorities. So we can talk through those as is helpful. In the coming year, things that we are seeing coming related to comp plan implementation, first and foremost is the downtown master plan, and potentially a piece of the small area plan or corridor plan, depending on how the RFPs come in for that project, they'll be due next week. the proposals in response to that. We do have the public hearing for residential parking maximums coming up in October. We are working on the schedule for a report to you about potential changes to the text and/or map of the land use ordinance for increasing residential density. We are working with a consultant on the fleet study, which is also looking at our conversion of our fleet and conversion of our equipment to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to increase alternative energy to power those vehicles and equipment. Looking forward to round 2. Well, we don't want to get too far ahead because the round 1 is underway and we've got great projects this year for the Green Neighborhood Grant Program, but we are looking, in the upcoming year for the round 2 of the Green Neighborhood Grant Program. We are scoping out the rental property task force, which is another one of the community climate action plan projects, and then a number of bike plan projects, separated bike lanes on Jones Ferry Road, similar design for that, to set the stage for some NCDOT resurfacing, both of these, and some other projects as well. So happy to answer questions or pull a slide up that shows any of the materials we have in your packet, or if I can be of assistance. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Trish, for that concise overview. Really helpful to see everything in one place, as you, I know, have been working hard with all the departments to make that happen as you convert from the Carrboro Connect site to getting everything available for ongoing public monitoring. I know a lot of people are interested in seeing how this implementation goes. I'll open it up to council members who have questions. One quick one I wanted to ask Trish on that last slide that you presented from the bike plan. What's the status of the Shelton Street redesign? Y'all have been working on a design for that for quite a while, and I didn't see it on your slide there.
Yeah, we have some. Sure. Yep. Shelton Street is in our list of projects. Right now, we're not actively doing design work on it, so we've made some progress, but we've turned our attention to these other locations, to Merritt Mill, and Jones Ferry and North Greensboro, because of the scheduled resurfacing of NCDOT, to try and get those things, the design plans in hand and approved, so we can have those realignments happen with the resurfacing. So
those are presenting a time crunch that you needed to kind of turn attention to those projects. Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to go to Danny, then Barbara, then Susan, then Randy. I'm going to write that down.
I really appreciate this. Sort of off outside of the particular presentation here, which was concise and really helpful. I do really want to commend the open houses that have been going on and just expanded abilities for transparency and communication. I think that's really valuable. So as far as this tonight, I think my thoughts are really just about making this as useful as possible. I think I'm mindful of the constant rolling nature of our work. It's tough to, that January session, I think we all felt really great about identifying those priorities, and it is so far away from January now. And the way that those priorities compete with some of the other work and things that we're asking departments to do with the comprehensive plan. I think it would be really beneficial to, so all to say that I think as good as those strategic sessions are, it's the budget. It's the budget. It's the budget. It's always going to be the budget. However many special sessions we want to have, our priorities are going to be reflected in the budget. So I think it would be really great to have this come before us in maybe April, maybe as a work session, a comprehensive plan implementation thing. And what I would be really curious about there is a column including blockers. Are we facing a prioritization problem? Are we facing a capacity problem? Are we facing a funding problem? It would be really helpful to get a sense from staff as we're going into budget cycle, what it is that you need to, to sort of clarify what it is that we want to be working on. And I think that we should get in the habit of operationalizing that in the budget rather than in sort of special sessions. So if we could have a back and forth dialogue in about 6 months, as the budget season is heating up, that includes blockers, which include I want to be really clear, which include the feedback that you're hearing from council, conflicting priorities. I would absolutely expect that to be somewhere where we hear from staff that is weighing on your work, budget, staff capacity, things of that nature. that would be really helpful. And I think in that discussion, it can be sort of like what that could help us get toward is a sort of a more, a better understood, I think for us, queue of, just things like that Shelton Street, that, that's a really helpful explanation. And it makes perfect sense. And I think it would be really helpful for us over time, over the next 2-3 years of budget processes. We can just establish a better sense, of all of those projects, because we have those blockers and because we know what we've funded and sort of within the context of this document. So hopefully our priorities start to conflict less and less.
Thanks, Danny. Mr. Manager, some thoughts that you might have about what you just heard. I'm thinking it's the thing that came to mind for me when Danny mentioned talking about this in the context of the budget, which I think is absolutely spot on, is that feels like April's too late. You really want to be having that conversation in February or something, right?
I would agree. That was my takeaway as well. And what I'd offer is, at next month's work session, we have this 5-year financial model coming before the council. That to me would kick off this whole conversation around projects and funding and all those kind of issues. That hopefully, when you work into the new council, that will kind of kick off that conversation. So I think by the time you get to April of next year, you'll have a really good sense, I hope, of where these projects are in the funding and how it's all going to line up in a much more strategic way and clearer way than we're doing it now. That's the whole goal of this 5-year modeling, is to get you there.
Faster's great for me. I love faster. Yeah, that sounds
I just
great.
say that because by the time April comes around, and we know this, all of us who've now been through budgets, we know that April, by that point, you have your inputs pretty much, and you're just working on fitting things in. So, thank you, Danny. I have next Barbara, then Randy, then Susan.
Thank you for the presentation, Trish. So I have 3 questions. So when I'm looking at, so I'm on September 2023, so land use ordinance and comprehensive plan consistency. And so we're talking about our current land use ordinance and our bold, shiny new comprehensive plan, correct?
Yes.
How does
Well, yes, we are.
And so I'm trying to figure out how that works. And I guess the larger question is there been any thought given to like a review of our current land use ordinance? I just looked at that and I said land use ordinance and comprehensive plan consistency. And I don't know how well that might work. Our current land use, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think, I think we are in the planning stages of kind of evaluating this project, and so there will be some changes, and we'll want to, of course, consider, we will be bringing forward some specific text amendments, like, for example, the ones we're looking at next month related to parking. We'll be looking at changes related to residential density, et cetera. And we'll be scoping at that we are scoping at the same time, what are the approaches we think the town will want to pursue in terms of this question of consistency. And so, will we do it sort of in bundles of things? Will we set out a schedule for different chapters? Will we want to do it as one big project that we have to budget a fair amount of money to work with a consultant for? There are pros and cons with various approaches. So we're in the planning stages of kind of considering how we think these other things are going to be occurring, these other changes, the commercial and mixed use, the downtown area plan, any of the corridor plans, et cetera, and how, anytime we bring forward changes that are related to those things, the parts of the land use ordinance that touch those things, we'll be looking for consistency with the commitment, the vision of the plan. So, we don't have we have to make a decision, about how we're going to proceed with this. But we'll do it. We will be doing some of it piecemeal. We may want to go forward with a more broad approach. But again, there are pros and cons to both approaches. So,
okay. And Randy had broached a question to me, and I was thinking cross-cutting. I'm moving to the second question. I was thinking about the cross-cutting themes and what they actually mean, cross-cutting themes across departments. And so how much interfacing between departments is occurring, or is it just the theme of cross-cutting? And Randy she may get deeper with that question, but the question, I guess, is how much actual communication is going on, or is it just the cross-cutting themes as we see it here on the sheet?
Any of the projects that involve multiple departments, I mean, we are communicating about those projects. You know, I think that, you know, one of the things about this whole process is that if you read the Chapter 11, none of the kind of products are anticipated. Probably the earliest one is sometime late in fiscal year 24, for example. You know, so, I mean, there's a fair amount of preparation of, and I was going to say one of the things about, you know, our commitment to GARE, our participation in GARE, that one of the things I really love is their framework of normalizing, organizing, and operationalizing. You know, that framework is something that we talk about all the time, and we are not, I mean, not just with regard to advancing race and equity, and I don't mean it like not just, you know what I'm saying? I mean, it's a fundamentally wonderful framework for thinking about how we have to move forward with doing something like this. So when you're dealing with many, many projects, you know, we are in a stage of normalizing where everyone's trying to understand what's the vocabulary, who's responsible, which project is mine, which project is yours, where do we intersect, et cetera, and then how do we go into those next steps. So, you know, we are working as cooperatively as we do with many things many projects that we, you know, that the town departments work on, where they cross boundaries, where they don't have perfect. And, you know, there aren't very many examples. Well, there are a few, but there are a lot of examples where we don't have perfect silos, where we're so integrated in the way we, integrally related, the way we have to work together.
If I could add, in October, the management team is going to retreat to have this very conversation. How do we increase our level of collaboration in preparation of this kind of work?
Yep.
So we plan to spend a full day focused on that type of work and communication.
Yeah. So we're working to make sure everybody's understanding the normalizing part, their roles, and identifying where we have our parts, and moving into those next steps of, you know, organizing to make things happen and operationalizing, you know. So I don't know if that helps answer the question.
It does, both questions. And the last one has to do with number 8 on the key strategic priorities progress report as it relates to in focus and what their process recommendations may be. And I guess my question is, will council, this is for probably Mr. White, will council get some type of presentation on part? I don't know that all of it will be presented, but can we get some kind of presentation with the recommendations, or how are you suggesting that work?
Yes, there will be a report back to council. We're working with the consultant now to get that wrapped up, but we will get a report back to council in some format. We'll figure out what that will look like.
Do you know if it'll be before?
Yes, the goal is to get that done in the next couple of weeks. Yes.
Okay, cool. That was it for me. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Barbara. Next is Randy.
Yeah, thank you, Barbara, for opening that up for me. Kudos to you all. I love the table. I love when things are color-coded like that. I know it works. So I'm actually, I've spent a lot of time thinking about the how. I'm very concerned about the how as a curriculum writer who had to take multiple strands of all the different kinds of sciences and look at cross-cutting and go one step beyond cross-cutting. So I'm going to, extend from what Barbara introduced of what she and I were talking about, and say back in 2019, several staff members and I attended the Triangle J summit, regional summit on systems thinking approach. And I think for the retreat, it would be great to have staff look at the table and start to use or be trained to use the systems thinking approach. And I'll tell you why, because it gets to priority conflicts. And that, to me, is one of the difficulties that lies ahead. So, because systems thinking is one that it kind of looks at how management of a project is adaptive and how it is the interface and the interrelationship so that it avoids, and I'm glad you said it this way because I think this is the crux. It avoids which project is yours and which is mine because it all becomes ours. So I'm pointing that out because I think this is a critical moment to expand the thinking. And I know it will take, maybe some training, but the bottom line is that in the work that I've done and what I've watched these things move from having magnificent material laid out in terms of how the thinking gets to this point to what is the process to follow. And compartmentalization really is disconnection, and we've got a lot of siloing, and I'd like to see us bridge all that siloing because an intentional process will ensure intentional product quality. And I think that what we've got here is just beautifully laid out, but it's the next steps where it could so easily fall if it stays within siloed individuals working on their part of the project. So I'm just going to put that out there. And then I have a question. So that was my recommendation for staff. And Tina should remember, I don't know if you would, I think Rebecca Buzzard was there and Tina, but you know what I'm talking about, the summit? Yeah, it was phenomenal. Michael Goodman was the presenter. Okay, and so my question is this: where does the climate action green neighborhood initiatives fall? I see where it says that you're looking at round 2. Okay, so this is a very pragmatic question because I'm always about bricks and mortar. Multiple projects are in process right now. And folks who are involved in those projects would really like to know what does part 2 of the project that they're working on look like. Because when you do something, and I can only speak, and I only will speak from my own experience, we have 53 homes that are composting in Fair Oaks. And they're really dedicated. I mean, as much composting as I've done for the school district, they're really dedicated. But the problem is going to be we're changing people's behaviors. So when funding runs out, okay, number one, would they be eligible for a part 2? Or if not, what happens with these projects when the neighborhood is ready to go on and we say, well, we're sorry, we can't continue to fund this, and we've changed behaviors? Because you see, when it comes to environmental impact and climate impact and advocacy, once you've changed people's behaviors, you're in a really dangerous place not to keep it going, to alter it at all. I mean, I come from the Blair Pollock School of waste diversion, and you try really hard not to change it. So that's my question with this, which is why I'm concerned about having fluidity when we start to look at budget, because it may mean that some of these programs that need to continue and expand we'll need to consider resources differently than we've thought we would.
So Trish, can you maybe offer some kind of answer around the next phase of the Green Neighborhoods Grant Program? Is there eligibility
we
for
are
existing?
entering into contracts now we have some contracts, we have some that we're just about to enter into with the grant recipients. And so, things are underway, and, we have some sort of feedback about the experience so far, but it's a little preliminary for me to say what we are anticipating round two, because we are committed to continuing this effort. We know that a fundamental aspect of the, of climate, our climate adaptation, our resilience, is about the behavior of so many people who live and work in this community. I mean, about the way their homes are, where they move around, et cetera. So it's a little bit preliminary for me to kind of answer the question. I think to the extent that there could be budgetary impacts in terms of us seeking, requesting from, in terms of our budget request, additional funding for this program, those are all anticipated, but I don't have any specifics right this minute. I don't think there's anything that would preclude right now that would preclude someone who was in round one from going into round two if, again, the submittal happens and they're considered and they meet the criteria and et cetera. So they justify the project. It seems like it's one that would be beneficial. But that's about as far as I would want to say right tonight, because I don't, anything more than that is really me seriously speculating. So
I agree, but that's the conundrum, because in round two there could be new requests, right? Yeah.
Yes.
And so let's say you have a successful pilot program, and so far what I'm seeing is massive success and massive compost. But I mean, the amount of, we're collecting data on how much compost is being collected and how much waste is being diverted by having collected that. So the question is going to be, if we go into the next budget cycle and we earmark $25,000 for the next round, but we have successful programs from the first round that need continued support, will there be climate monies that can continue that? Because one of our goals, and it's not particularly here, but is to look at waste reduction and potentially even model biweekly garbage pickup. So,
Yeah,
right. So, see what I'm saying? I mean, this is where there's these gaps, and we've got to get it clarified so that we don't, get caught in our own goodwill. And so, if there's some way that staff could be looking at this prior to the closing out of these pilots, and have a sense of whether or not it's possible that they could apply for their part two or the continuation. I think folks would want to know that before January.
We have an intern who's working with us right now on kind of designing a multifamily pilot composting project. So, I mean, we are, observing and attended the meeting last week with Orange County about the, they're looking at zero waste. And so the plan for the county, the solid waste plan. So I think that we will consider those factors for sure. And I don't have any reason to think we won't try to be expanding access to composting. We know that from the initial estimates we've done, it's not an insignificant way to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. So it is a priority. Yep.
Thank you for indulging me on that.
Thank you, Trish. Thanks, Randy. Next is Susan.
Thank you. Thank you, Danny, and Barbara and Randy for your questions, comments. Have been really helpful for me. And I wanted to say how perfect to be doing your planning update on the kickoff to our Community Planning Month. So well timed.
Sounds like a plan.
Yes. Very clever.
I don't know how that happened.
So
you,
I
Richard.
have three kind of broad categories. And the first deals with an email Patrick McDonough sent. I think that was earlier today. I'm not sure if you were copied, Trish, but I know the manager and assistant town manager were copied. And I just wanted to lift up three things from that email that I was hoping would be considered. The first is identifying the owner of each of the 13 key strategic priorities, and if there is a consultant, having whichever staff member will be overseeing the consultant. And I know this runs, Randy, I appreciated your comment about, everybody being an owner, getting to that point that all of staff feels ownership for this comprehensive plan. But in terms of the spreadsheets and the nitty gritty, I was going to lift that up. I also wanted to mention in that same 13 key strategic priorities progress report, a little bit more specifics in terms of it seems like some of the items do have numbers associated with them or dates associated with them, but the more phrases like several could be turned into 3, 4, 5, or the more phrases like beginning to scope project, what that date is and when the expected completion date is. I think it will add a little bit of tightness to this progress report. And then the other thing Patrick had mentioned, and I wanted to mention as well, I'm not sure if there is a schedule right now in terms of the updates provided to council on the comprehensive plan, but I was going to suggest as, frequently as quarterly, every 2 months or quarterly, just so everybody, a quick report. It doesn't have to be this length at all, but just a quick report in terms of where things are. The second category I wanted to mention was just the overall staffing and bandwidth to carry out the comprehensive plan. And I know this past year has been really challenging being without a transportation planner. I wanted to thank our assistant manager, Parker, because I think the emails that I got, that I had a chance to see, really bring into context why this has been so challenging. It's just a really competitive landscape for hiring transportation planners. I appreciate the challenges of even bringing in a consultant. Danny, you mentioned the on-call engineers with MPO, and that's challenging too. So I appreciate all the work that staff is doing with that hiring, and I appreciate continuing to keep us up to date in terms of how that's going on. It does bring me to the efficiency study that I know that is happening within the planning department now, and I'm curious. Two things. First question is when maybe this is for Manager White, but first question is when do you anticipate council would get an update on the findings from that study? And also, I'm curious if there will be specific recommendations in that study in terms of the staffing that will be needed to be able to carry out the comprehensive plan in as timely as a way as possible.
So yes, the consultant's wrapping up his work, and we expect to get a response any day now in terms of getting a draft of that report, and we'll need to read through it and figure out what all that is. So that the plan is to get that to a report to council before I'm gone at the end of October. The other part of that is the efficiency study. Only looked at the planning department. We've also asked about doing a staffing study, which we have an RFP on the street soon, I think, for that effort. But that would be the town-wide look at staffing capacity as well, and I think that would directly tie into this 5-year plan and trying to figure out, do we have the capacity to meet all the goals in the comp plan? So all this work that's coming in this next fiscal year.
So I'm sorry, so something similar to what's been happening with the planning department would actually be done for all of the departments?
Town-wide, a little different focus though, but the goal of the staffing study would be to look at the town-wide capacity among staff to see if we are sufficiently staffed to do the work we're being asked to do, and also look at the comp plan as well to make sure we got the staffing capacity to handle all of the goals in the plan.
I may know the answer to that even before you do the study, but
hopefully the report will confirm it, but also give us some guidance in terms of where we need to go as well to fill in those gaps.
Okay, good. Great. Well, we'll look forward to hearing about the study before you leave. And then finally, Trish, I just had a few questions. This is more sort of some specific projects. One is the 203 project. Usually when you hear the word construction, the very next word you hear is delays. So I couldn't be happier that this project seems to be still on schedule. The library could be, and the whole 203 project could be open, sounds like summer of 2024. And my question is, I know in the past, the council had a very brief conversation about some fundraising opportunities with the 203, everything from people having a room named after them, or I think, Randy, you may have mentioned this, or people,
White
or bricks for the sidewalk, or plaques in the lobbies where people are sponsors or whatever. So
Outlets.
yeah. So this may be for the manager as well. I'm just curious if these conversations will be held. I know we also have a meeting in terms of the naming policy for the building, but I didn't know if some of this fundraising could be discussed and maybe something implemented before the opening of the 203, because it does seem like a prime opportunity to be able to raise a little bit of revenue.
We have had those conversations because one thought was to have kind of the buy a brick and have a brick plaza. I need to check back in with Ben Smatic, our capital project manager. He's been working on that effort as well to figure out those opportunities. So we haven't been talking about that, but we'll get something more concrete and back in front of council.
No pun intended. Great. We'll look forward to that as well. The next was planning stage for parking enforcement. So I'm thrilled that we're planning, and one of the what's really critical with the parking enforcement is the hiring of this I think we called parking ambassador to be doing more of the enforcement. And so I was hoping with this item here, there could be, I don't know if we're getting close. I would love to get this person hired. In some ways, I feel like the parking ambassador will, sort of influence some of the other decisions we have around paid parking and what have you. So I was hoping that item could have a little bit more specificity in terms of when this parking ambassador hopefully will be brought on board.
There is an agenda item scheduled in the next, I think in October, for the ordinance provisions related to enforcement, I believe, on the calendar. And so perhaps that update could be included there.
That would be great. I'll be sure to ask. Thank you. That's helpful.
And we can talk about that maybe.
And that actually leads to my next question, the parking maximum text amendment. In your slide, you mentioned that this will be just residential then and not the commercial.
That's right.
And do you have a sense of when the commercial, we'll also be looking at the commercial maximums?
I think we'll start with that as part of the downtown area plan work. So we'll be looking at ordinance changes that are related to the downtown, and then that is the bulk of our commercial area is there. But we'll consider that for the other locations that outline commercial areas as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And
that was my thinking about how we would approach that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that helps. Final question. I've had a few questions that have come up about the South Greensboro sidewalk. And so just so I'm clear, it sounds like a water line was discovered that was not expected to have been there. So that needed to be relocated. The project needed to be redesigned. It sounds like the project is now underway again.
Well, the design work is
we just had
our
completed.
Kickoff meeting last week or 10 days ago. The water line was discovered and then really brought our design work on the sidewalk kind of to a halt, because we had to then work on a plan to have the relocation of that line designed. And so we were able to identify additional funding through the transit tax and with the MPO and Go Triangle and all, and to get the contract provisions for that developed by the contractor we've been working with, the design team, and then approved by NCDOT. So we got through all of those steps and had our kickoff meeting with the additional folks on our design team, like I said, about 10 days ago. And so they're going to be working on the design plans for relocating that water line. And then we'll continue. The design plans for the sidewalk itself, I think, are at about 60%. So we can provide an updated. I think when we do our next transportation update, we'll put an updated schedule in there, and then that'll come to you as a link in the CMU council manager update. So.
If you had to guess, would you say the sidewalk would be completed within 1 year, within 2 years?
I think we're probably looking at calendar year 25. What's next year, 24? Yeah, 25.
Calendar year
Just in
25.
time, in terms of the permitting associated with the water line and the design components, I think that will be the case when it will be able to go out to bid and have the construction work. But I'll know that more, know more clearly. We'll provide that in the update. So.
Okay. Final question, because this is a question for our staff. There's $1 million in the budget for the design of town hall renovations. So it sounds like there will be some options provided on the renovations to town hall. And then within the next year is the goal that, council decides on which of those options. And then next year in the capital improvement budget, the funding gets put there to actually carry out to move forward with the renovations. Is that how we should be thinking about this?
So we think the $1 million will help us get the design process going and to generate some options. But we think it's going to take a whole lot more than $1 million to really move forward.
No,
with the
I
project.
mean just the design. But
the-
next year the $19-20 million, right?
Yes, we'll have further conversation about exactly what that cost might look like and how it fits inside of this 5-year plan, if you will, to get this building renovation underway. Plus the Century Center, we're trying to do that as well, and some discussion about public works. So all this wrapped up in this 5-year conversation. We want to get started next month.
Okay. That's
Your sleeves, Carrboro.
Yes.
And I'm looking at Tina. I didn't realize she was in the room. She might have a different date for me for the sidewalk. Do you have anything else? That was good? Okay.
2025.
Good.
Thanks, Trish.
Thank you.
You bet.
Before we keep going here, did you want to? Okay, I just want to quickly, as I mentioned earlier, Eleazar had to be away for a family issue that came up. But he did send me some notes to share on this item and on the next item. He first just wanted to express appreciation to staff for the progress that's being made. A couple of these things you've mentioned already. He liked the idea of I think he wanted to know about a landing page, a central location for information about implementation, and it sounds like staff is working on that transition to locate all of that information on the town's website.
We have it. We have the plan there and the work that we've been doing so far. So yeah, that's our home base.
That will be the new home base for any kind of metrics reporting, progress reporting, all of that. Okay.
That's our thinking.
And then Eleazar also asked on the priority around seeking funding to empower community members to become homeowners. That project notes that it hasn't started yet, but it's reported to be in planning and analysis by the end of this year. And he asks, what does that actually look like? What does that planning analysis phase look like for that specific project? Or will that not be known until the staff actually sits down and embarks on it?
Anne Marie's here. I don't know if she has any information to share about that, but we might want to report back to you maybe more fully in a separate. But it's yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll get some
So she has
information
time
from
to
Anne Marie
prepare.
about that particular project.
Sure.
Thank you very much. Next is Sammy.
Yeah, thank you. I agree. This is helpful to have this bird's eye view of all that we want to do. So lots of appreciation for staff to bring this before us. I'm encouraged to hear that parking enforcement's in the planning stage, and you mentioned in October we'll get actual language for the ordinance. Is that what I understood? Yeah. Does that mean that paid parking policy, which is more advanced in an analysis stage, are we going to have something before October, or is that part of that agenda item?
I think it might be enforcement provisions, but I need to check with John to know more fully what he's scoping there.
Okay, I'm just because analysis is ahead of planning, right? As it's drawn out. So I'm just trying to understand: is paid park when will we?
Planning
see
is before analysis. We plan that's our scoping.
Yeah, right. So
move into-
planning. So we're going to have a parking enforcement language. So I presume that because paid parking policy is in analysis stage, which is ahead of planning, are we going to receive something on that?
I can check. I'm not sure about that. So
Okay, I hope so. If that's how those things work, planning first, analysis second. I had a question. I read scope for the RFP in the downtown area to include buffer around commercial area. What exactly is the buffer around the commercial area? What is that, like a
For the
residential?
RFP. So we just expanded, took a buffer around the commercially zoned area. So the downtown has historically been described really as the commercially zoned areas. So on the map, on the zoning map, we use the red and purple shades to really deal with, to depict commercial areas and primarily non-residential areas that are like business zones, not manufacturing. And so in the for the downtown RFP, we created, we went out 300 feet or so around into those residential areas so that we were sure to see those property owners, those residents as very direct stakeholders to have a voice in either, both, considering how transitions might happen, if there are any interest in changes at that fringe.
Okay, so they're incorporated in the process of developing.
They're specifically within the sort of scope, mapping scope, and the
Okay, got
analysis
it.
scope that we're seeking proposals for the plan.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mhm.
And for the town building renovations, I'm hoping that we can include solarizing and energy efficiency as a baseline for all options. It sounds like we're looking for various options, cost options, but that we not do like we did with the 203, that it was an option that a lot of energy had to be put into to make sure it was there. Can we just depart from in an assumption that energy efficiency and solarizing is going to be included in all the options?
Could you start the beginning of your statement again? I didn't catch
So
up
in the
entirely.
town
so I
building
just wanna be-
renovations, it says that the
Okay.
request for qualifications, that one of the tasks will be focused on developing different cost options for the renovation project for the town to consider. So my hope is that as a baseline in all the options, energy efficiency and solarizing the building will be included.
I mean, I think I think that's certainly up to the manager in the scoping for the project, but it would make sense to me to, work towards as much resilience and greenhouse gas emissions.
I mean, I
reduction.
guess related to that is scoping is kind of sets the tone. Will the council have an beyond right now an opportunity to weigh in on what that scope is?
Well, I think council's been very clear about that being a goal of the government, and so we make sure that that's at the top of the list when we work through that. We
Baseline.
wouldn't bring the scope back, but yes, but that it would be a
Yeah,
part of the
that-
project.
Okay, so solarizing and energy efficiency as baseline for all options. Okay, good. That's great. So yeah, I guess related to the pay for parking analysis, given that the 203 project's going to be in summer 2024, it sounds like it's going to happen way earlier because it's already at the analysis stage, and y'all are going to bring something in October for parking enforcement. So that's kind of an obsolete question, but definitely before the opening of the 203, I would hope, so that we can consider how to potentially do pay for parking in the parking deck and start that, open it up with that implemented. Let's see. In regard to the land use, so the draft parking amendment and PUD density amendment to come forward October 24th. My understanding is that the legislature recently changed the law so that multi-level duplexes and triplexes are now possible in the state. Is staff considering that in the amendments of the LUO amendments that might be presented to us?
We haven't, the ones that we have prepared so far don't really address that particular topic, but the analysis that will be, that we're scoping for residential density, et cetera, is we'll be considering all kinds of residential units and different approaches to kind of achieving the plan's vision for housing
Okay.
for all.
Okay, great. Lastly, I'm glad to hear the linkage of the climate of the budget with the comprehensive plan, as Danny pointed out, and the point made of how important it is to not wait till April because that is too late. as I've been requesting over many, many years, I hope that this time the climate budget will be included and as part of that 5-year early budget conversation that we're talking about, that you're going to be bringing to us sooner than later. Is that something that?
Again, climbs are high. It's one of the council's goals, so we'll do all we can to incorporate that into the process.
Okay, because in the past, it's been 2 weeks before we approve of the budget, and so it's very important that we actually do that this time. Today, I biked by Westwood Cemetery. I realized that it's not just Bradford pears that are along the street. There are some oaks and other hardwood trees that are included, and we've talked about doing away with the Bradford pears, but we have all these other trees, and so and listed as part of our comprehensive plan, we have a street tree plan. So I just want to make sure that we are not going to replace those trees with the fence, that there's a way in which the fence will allow and include not just a continuation of those trees that already exist that are not Bradford pears, but replacement of the Bradford pears with street trees, with canopy trees. Those are all my comments for now. Thank you. It's great to get kind of full view and have an opportunity to comment on it. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sammy. Thanks, everyone, for your comments. Trish, thank you for this overview. I don't know how you keep your head all around it, but you do certainly manage it. Council members, there's a motion to receive the report.
So moved.
And moved by Randy, seconded by Barbara, that we receive the report. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
No, that's fine with the vote. Go ahead.
Any opposed? All pass unanimously. Mr. Manager.
Sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted, before Trish left the podium, say thank you to Trish for her work in organizing this reporting structure. And also to thank all the staff. I don't know if you can put that slide back up there. There's a lot of blue on that page.
Yep.
There's a lot of work being done. I just want to say thank you to all the staff for helping move all this forward.
Absolutely. It's impressive to see it all in one place like this. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Keep up with the color coding.
I agree. Thank you all.
All right. Mr. Manager, next up, we have a long-awaited amendment to our ordinance.
Yes, amendment to Chapter 2 of the Town Code to allow remote participation by council members. The purpose of the agenda item is to consider an amendment to Chapter 2 of the Carrboro Town Code to allow remote participation by council members at official town council meetings. And we do not have a formal presentation, but the town attorney and town clerk are here to answer any questions you might have.
I think for folks who may be listening in for the first time on this particular topic, it's just a reminder that the language here that we're considering to add to our town code is really emerging from legislation that was passed by the legislature a year ago or so. It's been a little while, and the town attorney's office and the clerk and others have been working on preparing this language for us. So they've been a couple drafts back and forth. This is our opportunity. I know there's been interest by council members in adopting something like this as now allowed by statute. So I'll open it up to any questions that folks have. I have a couple of questions from Eleazar as well on this topic. Barbara?
So I don't really have any questions. I guess this was Nick and Wesley who worked on this together, and so thank you for doing that. So a couple of things that jumped out at me. The proposed ordinance amendment is only allowed when a quorum of the council is physically present at the meeting, and no remote participation for quasi-judicial hearings. And being able to hear, I guess, and all the different reasons. So you have like 9 reasons here, so you feel like you pretty much covered everything possible, that would keep us from and the number of times per year. No council member may participate remotely more than 4 times during a calendar year for a reason other than order of quarantine or isolation. So in the event of another pandemic or something along those lines, 4 times a year max.
With one exception, that the council can decide to waive that.
Oh, I see. You're correct. may by majority vote agree to waive this limitation of 4 times a year. Okay, got it. Yeah, so those are the things that kind of jumped out at me. I think it looks fine, reasonable. Thanks.
Thanks, Barbara. And Nick, can you just speak also to the issue? We know that an actual quorum has to be present in the room for this to operate.
That's what we're recommending.
And also no, not in the situation of quasi judicial proceedings. You have to be present.
Because your role is different, evaluating the credibility of witnesses, seeing it live.
Right. And then the one that I wanted to throw in too, just to get your reaction on, was this does not allow a remotely participating council member to vote, right? In other words, don't you have to be present to vote?
No.
Oh, you
No.
can vote.
But this is different than what some other bodies have done, I think, different than what we've been.
You can vote.
Okay. Just want to make sure we're understanding.
Right, fully.
But not if it's quasi judicial.
Right.
No quasi.
Not if it's
Quasi
quasi.
judicial, you all have to be here.
Right.
Good. I have Susan next.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is great to get this language written. So thank you both. This is just a couple, 2, 3 really small things. One is, it does help for the clerk to know in advance if somebody will be participating remotely, making sure the equipment's set up, making sure that we'll have a physical quorum here at Town Hall. So I wondered about including language that when the agenda packet goes out on Friday, that each Friday it also includes, just a reminder, if you know now that you will be attending the meeting remotely, let the clerk know. Those reminders I know help me a lot, but
Well, Susan, there's a provision in here.
4 hours prior.
4 hours prior.
Yeah, and I think we've cleared it with the clerk.
I meant that just as a reminder that, 4 hours
Sure,
prior, let the clerk know.
It'd be nice to have more than 4 hours notice for the
Oh, I see what you're
You
saying.
see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that wouldn't work.
It would just be the standard line each Friday packet, just a reminder that if you're not. There was also language about when going into closed session, the person who's participating remotely really shouldn't have anybody else in the room who can overhear. And so I don't know if this belongs in the ordinance or not, but it would be a nice opportunity for the clerk to remind whoever's participating remotely, if there's
that's
anybody
my job.
overseeing. That's your job? Okay.
I believe so. Try to preserve the confidence.
Okay. Okay, great.
The clerk would agree that he or she, right,
Mm-hmm.
would do that too, but I'd be very sensitive to that.
Okay. My only other question, and I sent an email about this earlier today. So it's this idea that, a council member may not be able to participate because they cannot afford the high-speed internet access. I think that was in one of the pocket questions. And I didn't know if that's something that council pays for, just like, I assume, Mr. Manager, that staff working remotely have high-speed internet access paid for through the town, and would it just
They have
also
a
cover?
phone.
Our iPads have.
Yeah, they do.
And the phone, they have their phones. I mean,
Just
It shouldn't be an issue for council
yeah.
members, because we are provided with equipment that has
Yeah,
high-speed access.
this already has high-speed access. Okay,
It's a good question,
Yeah.
Susan.
that's all. Thank you.
Let me make sure I don't want to miss Eleazar's questions also. He also had the recommendation that just folks, giving the clerk more than 4 hours notice would be good. 4 hours is the minimum notice. I think he just also sort of reiterating that this is a policy that's meant to be used sparingly.
Mhm.
Expectation is that council members attend council meetings. This is meant to accommodate situations where it may not be possible for rare reasons. So just Eleazar was sort of making that point in his comments. Are there any other comments on the? Randy, go ahead.
yeah, I have a what-if question. Because under the 4 times, no more than 4 times during a calendar year, And that's based on, the only flexibility in that is a quarantine or isolation, a stay-at-home mandate. But given what we now know about the ebb and flow of COVID and certain variants of COVID, I'm just wondering, we can't assume across the board people have equal immunity, and that maybe wearing a mask and being here may be out of the question for them, or maybe they have some other very specific illness that would prevent them, that 4 times could be 1 month and they need 3. I would want us to not base it on a mandate or a quarantine, but whether or not a personal illness or immune compromised situation, because I'm thinking about when people become differently abled. I'm thinking about our finance director and how, if he were on council, what would have happened. So, I'd like to see more flexibility, because I think that this is very cut and dry, and it may not, it may cause people to be in a very tough situation in their life and have to make decisions that are uncomfortable.
Yeah, so I think one thing I do like that is built into the language here, Randy, is that in that same, I think it's the same paragraph, yeah, that there is flexibility built in. In other words, the council can waive that restriction.
Right, I understand, but I'd rather that instead of just having it come down to quarantine and isolation, that if personal illness or immune compromise situation dictates, I would just want that in there as just further protection for folks who find themselves in a differently abled situation.
Well, that would be isolation.
No, this isolation refers
Refers to a public order.
Public order.
I can suggest an edit.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe we
look
suggest
at
this, Nick, is that, because I think this is going to be harder to integrate like on the fly like this. I would like for us to be moving ahead with the proposed ordinance here, if people, assuming the council is still open
Well, I'd
to
like
it.
to hear what Nick is
Yeah.
offering.
But
I can give
there's
you a
option
short
option
edit.
to amend it.
A short edit. Oh, y'all take a look at E, okay?
Yeah.
And look at where it starts, however, in other justifiable circumstances, comma, such as prolonged disability of the member, comma, the council may.
Okay.
That at least provides an example.
Mm-hmm.
You use COVID. What if somebody has a severe back surgery? You might not be able to go anywhere for 6 months.
Precisely. That's my point.
Well, otherwise functioning very well. But you just
Exactly.
can't.
Thank you for that.
All right, I've written that down.
With that amendment, I
One
would like
second. Go ahead, Sam.
to move the ordinance, the language is an ordinance or amendment to chapter 2.
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Sammy, seconded by Danny, that we approve the ordinance amendment with the addition of the language from the attorney in section E, such as prolonged disability. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The matter passes unanimously. Great, thanks for all your work on this, Nick.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Randy.
Right, council members, any matters before we go into closed session? A motion to go into closed session, please.
So moved.
Moved by Danny, seconded by Randy, that we go into closed session. This is for discuss a personnel matter as required by subsection A3 of the closed session statute. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The matter passes unanimously. Mr. Attorney would like to request that you stay with us, if you would, please.